Hi, I'm Ken Schooland, and I'm also talking with Mary Ruert. Mary Ruert's the CEO, the chairman of the board of Liberty International, and we've been asked some questions about this coronavirus situation. Mary, everybody's saying that the government needs to be stepping in and solving this problem and saving us from ourselves. What did the government do in the first place that helped contribute to this whole mess?
Well, actually, we wouldn't be in the mess we were in without government interference, specifically the FDA. What the FDA did when the coronavirus epidemic started is it said that no one could import test kits in the US, no one could make test kits in the US except for the CDC. Unfortunately, the CDC didn't do a very good job making the test kits. They failed and had to be recalled. So we went about 6 weeks at least, maybe 2 months, without test kits, even though the Germans had plenty of them and were willing to sell them to us. A similar thing happened with protective gear. We were told we could not import it, and we couldn't have our domestic manufacturers make it unless they were already making it. And so our healthcare workers did not have the protective gear they needed when they worked with patients. They were reusing disposable items. And we were putting them at risk because of this. Finally, the FDA relented on both of these fronts. And now we at least have the possibility of test kits. But of course, it takes a while to gear up. So we've lost a lot of time. Consequently, we don't know who's infected and who isn't. And that's what caused the government to say, well, we have to have social distancing. We have to shut down the economy and not let people go to work, because that was about all that was left. Now, if we'd had the protective gear and we'd had the testing, we could let people go to work. And of course, if they had ample supplies of hand sanitizers, that would have helped too. And even though the distillers, over 50 of them, offered to ramp up their production and shifted over totally to hand sanitizers, the government said, the FDA again specifically, said, well, you can do that, but you have to add something to that so people won't drink the hand sanitizer. And the distillers didn't want to do that because it would contaminate their machinery. There was no way to clean it up afterwards. They would have had to junk all of their machinery. So of course they didn't want to do that either. And so a lot of us are going without supplies of hand sanitizers. I think the FDA has finally backed off on that as well. But 6 weeks is a long time for this epidemic. And we wouldn't have to have shut down the economy.
Some people are concerned that, well, if you allowed other people to produce them who weren't approved and all, wouldn't you be inviting perhaps risky and unsafe kinds of products be coming in from other countries or being produced that weren't actually satisfactory? Isn't the CDC protecting us from that?
Well, all the CDC did was make us, they actually created a situation where the only tests we had available didn't work from the CDC. Now, the Germans, of course, had used the tests. They had sent 250,000 kits to WHO. So obviously they were ramped up and able to—
The World Health Organization, you mean?
Yes, the World Health Organization. So they were ready and able and willing and eager to send us these test kits, but we said no. And of course, because we delayed letting them know we wanted some, and because we delayed ramping up domestic production, we are now in a situation where we don't know which are the best test kits and which aren't. So if we'd had this extra 6 weeks, we probably would have been in a good situation. The problem with all of this is because the economy has essentially been at least partially shut down, we're now going to face either a deep recession or even a depression when this is over. And of course, Ken, you're an economist. You know what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, or at least to alleviate the situation. And I think people would really like to know about that, because they're out of work and they're not getting paychecks.
What constantly amazes me is that politicians always offer solutions that increase their power. They never offer solutions that decrease their power. I mean, if the government wanted to actually help the economy right now, the best things that they could do would be start getting out of the way in the things that they've been interfering with. For example, these massive tariffs and trade barriers that Trump has put up against the world to punish the rest of the world. I mean, really, he could do a lot to our own economy just in ending those trade barriers. And what does he do? He goes marching around the world to Saudi Arabia and Russia and to Mexico to try and restrict the amount of production of oil so that we can have the luxury of having higher prices in oil. Doesn't he realize that all of these things that keep out foreign products or restrict the production of other products raises the cost of living to consumers, so they have less money, they are impoverished. So the government says, well, we'll solve that problem by sending you checks. We're going to print up a whole bunch of money, and that's only going to generate inflation down the road, but it doesn't solve the problem of more products for us and having a wealthier society. I'm most fascinated by Henry George's statement that the government or protectionism in all of its forms does to our own nation in peacetime what the enemy would do to us in wartime. I mean, consider
Yes.
what would the enemy want to do to shut down another country? During the Civil War, the northern states blockaded the southern states. During World War I and World War II, the Germans and the British were trying to blockade each other. What does our own government do now? They blockade us from having access to the world market. And
That's right. And we could get cheaper products, so we'd all be better off.
Exactly. So we don't need the government's answer to these problems. We need the government to get out of the way, just as with those health remedies that could have been addressed earlier on. I think this is a good statement of libertarians to be making to the world, that the government is like a disease masquerading as its own cure.